The Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor that took the lives of 2,400 people drastically changed the course of World War II and the involvement of America in it. But history could have turned out quite differently. Days before the December 7, 1941 incident, UK Prime Minister Winston Churchill and US President Franklin D. Roosevelt had come to an agreement, and the US Secretary of State was in the process of drafting a speech pleading with Congress to change their stance on the war. Had the Pearl Harbor attack not happened, there was a real possibility that the United States would have attacked Japan first, all in the name of the United Kingdom. An agreement. On August 12, 1941, the British battleship HMS Prince of Wales, with Prime Minister Winston Churchill on board, docked in Placentia Bay in Newfoundland, Canada. The ship met up with the American heavy cruiser USS Augusta, where President Franklin D. Roosevelt and members of his staff were already waiting for the English leader. The two men were meeting in secret for the first time to thrash out the terms of what came to be known as the Atlantic Charter. Once Churchill saw Roosevelt, there was a moment of silence until Churchill said, quote, "At long last, Mr. President." To which Roosevelt replied, quote, "Glad to have you aboard, Mr. Churchill." The primary objective of the leaders' first rendezvous was to confer about the increasingly hostile and threatening moves the Japanese were doing in the Far East countries. After barely escaping a Nazi invasion the year before, and in the middle of a struggle with General Erwin Rommel's Afrika Korps in northern Africa, Churchill was unwilling to take any chances. The United Kingdom was seeking a way to persuade the Japanese out of attacking British-occupied Malaya and the Dutch East Indies. At the time of the meeting, the Vichy French, an ally of Nazi Germany, had asserted control of all French colonies in Indochina. The Japanese had also successfully occupied 8 air bases and 2 of the major seaports in the same region. Therefore, British and Dutch-occupied territories in the area were at a significant disadvantage. Churchill believed that the only way to stand a chance in the conflict was to partner with the United States and have them declare war on the Japanese should they attack the Dutch and British territories. He insisted to Roosevelt on the urgent need to make a joint statement or face severe consequences. Churchill later wrote about his thoughts over the looming Japanese threat, quote, "My feeling was that if Japan attacked us, the United States would come in. If it did not come in, we had no means of defending the Dutch East Indies, or indeed our own empire in the East." However, both men knew that convincing the US Congress, which had the last word and was pushing for peaceful operations, would be difficult. Even more so, as it meant fighting on behalf of 2 European-owned territories far away in Southeast Asia. Still, Churchill wholeheartedly believed he had achieved what he wanted after Roosevelt parted. In a telegraph sent that same week, he bragged to his Foreign Secretary, Anthony Eden, that he was the one who helped Roosevelt and his staff draft the memo's closing statement, which would read, quote, "Any further encroachment by Japan in the Southwest Pacific would produce a situation in which the United States government would be compelled to take countermeasures, even though these might lead to war between the United States and Japan." A lukewarm statement. Proving their concerns correct, the US State Department believed the declaration was too overtly bellicose. When Secretary of State Cordell Hull looked at the statement's final paragraph, he and his advisors agreed that the message needed to be watered down. To achieve this task, the final declaration became more vague. It was changed twice to avoid any wording that Hull found too confrontational. In the final draft that Roosevelt delivered to Japanese Ambassador Kichisaburo Nomura, the document stated only that, quote, "The government of the United States will take all steps towards safeguarding the legitimate rights and interests of the United States and American nationals, and toward ensuring the safety and security of the United States." Churchill thought the US President's statement was too tame in relation to the situation's pressing danger. Still, the Prime Minister firmly believed that America would join in the fight if the Japanese attacked the British or Dutch territories. Change of mind. Despite Churchill's efforts to de-escalate Indochina's state of affairs, no headway was made during the summer or fall. Tensions continued to rise, but Roosevelt still doubted that a Japanese land or sea campaign against the territories was imminent. By November 17th, the president polled his cabinet on whether or not they believed the American public would back the government should they respond to an attack on the British or Dutch Indochina territories. With an almost unanimous yes response, the cabinet agreed that Roosevelt should start to emphasize the increasingly dangerous situation publicly and plan a specific strategy: stalling the Japanese. After the poll's overwhelming results, the US government's top priority became to delay the Japanese as long as possible so that the US military could prepare to counterattack after a potential strike. In a meeting between Roosevelt and then Secretary of War Henry Stimson, the men mulled over what should be conveyed to Ambassador Nomura. Stimson later recalled, that the president suggested proposing a 6-month-long truce with no movement or armament. However, around that same time, U.S. intelligence intercepted a coded Japanese message sent to the ambassador relating to the potential peacetime agreement. The memo revealed that the emperor had ordered to repatriate all non-essential personnel, suggesting that Japan would reject any sort of settlement with the Allies. The remaining Japanese ambassadors were then told to agree to refrain from further armed advancement for only 3 months while negotiations continued between the Allies and the Axis. However, British Ambassador Lord Halifax delivered a report to Roosevelt in late November about 30 Japanese ships carrying up to 40,000 men leaving Japanese waters and heading south of China. This meant that the Japanese were already targeting the Allies even before coming to an agreement. These moves put added pressure on Roosevelt and his promise to Churchill at the Atlantic Conference, and he wondered if he should declare war on Japan on behalf of the United Kingdom. On November 26th, the Japanese ambassadors met with Secretary of State Hull and were outraged when he put forward a new 10-point attachment to his initial proposal. In the addendum, Japan was instructed to withdraw all military, naval, air, and police forces from China and Indochina. Later that afternoon, as Nomura contacted Tokyo to inform them about the meeting, he relayed the added instructions as an ultimatum. On December 1st, an intelligence officer reported that Japanese troops at sea were nearing the Gulf of Siam. The War Cabinet then decided that should the Japanese penetrate the Gulf in a clear confrontation against Britain, the United States should join the fight. Roosevelt instructed the Chief of Naval Operations for the Asiatic Fleet to send a line of ships to form a defensive patrol directly into harm's way with the intention to provoke the Japanese and have them shoot first. It was now only a matter of time. The speech that never happened. While their naval strategy was ongoing, Roosevelt asked Hull to write a speech addressed to Congress in case he needed to suddenly declare war on the Japanese. On December 6th, Roosevelt sent his last appeal to the Japanese emperor after receiving a message from the British Admiralty that they had seen 2 invasion forces moving towards the Gulf. As the Japanese weren't replying to his appeal, Roosevelt became ready to deliver the speech before a divided Congress, still unsure about the possibility of sending American boys right into a global war. He then established December 9th as the deadline to get a response. The opening paragraph of the speech read, quote, "Gentlemen of the Congress, I have come before you to report to you on the serious danger which is threatening this country and its interest in the Far East. Relations between the United States and the Japanese Empire have reached a stage where I consider it incumbent upon me to lay before you the essential facts of the situation and their extremely serious implications." The speech was over 4,000 words long and addressed the diplomatic history between the two powers. It also outlined Japan's rise as a military power, its previous aggressions towards China, and its current provocations against Dutch and British-occupied territories. In the speech's closing paragraphs, Roosevelt would try to persuade Congress into declaring war, reaffirming his belief that, quote, "We do not want war with Japan. If, however, war should come, the fault and responsibility will be those of Japan." But the speech was never delivered, and history would have Japan attacking first on December 7th. America had no choice but to join the war on its own behalf. Secretary of War Henry Stimson would write in his diary that day that, quote, "When the news first came that Japan had attacked us, my first feeling was of relief, that indecision was over, and that a crisis had come in a way which would unite all of our people." A day later, Roosevelt addressed the nation and reassured the American public that he would do anything in his power to ensure a U.S. victory. Quote, "No matter how long it may take us to overcome this premeditated invasion, the American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory." Thank you for watching our Dark Seas channel. Feel free to leave a comment if you know of an interesting story in open waters that you would like us to cover. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified of our newest content.